Welcome back, everybody. I hope we don't have any newcomers. I don't want to go over all the AV stuff again with you. Just remember that when you go to question and answer, we're switching off the stage and on to the sessions. Click on the banner for the speaker whose Q&A session you want to go to, and then you'll be in there and you can ask questions. So hopefully you guys are enjoying everything so far. I think it has been just a fantastic conference to date. Again, it seems to just mysteriously meld together and everything supports everything, and there's always just amazing stuff that comes out of the presentation. So all right, so our next presenter, tell you a little story as we lead into this. The first time I had exposure to much of the information in the particular case that our next presenter is going to talk about was I was walking through the mall one day back when they had bookstores. If you can remember, B. Dalton bookstore, that's how long ago that was. I'm walking by the bookstore and I can see like one of their display rack end caps near the front of the store where they put all the books to try and draw you into the store. And sitting on the top of that in a little easel was this coffee table book called Contact from the Pleiades by Billy Meier. It was about the Billy Meier case. It was a big, beautiful book with these fantastically clear UFO pictures on the cover and inside. And I immediately, of course, was drawn to it. And I took it down and I started looking through this book, and just the most amazing pictures of UFOs that I've ever seen in there. And there was very little content, lots of pictures. It was, like I say, it was a coffee table book. And it was the first time that I had seen or heard anything about the Billy Meier case. And I was just like, literally there's that left brain part of me that said, this is too good to be true, right? These pictures are just too fantastic. And why would this information come out as a coffee table book before it would come out in other ways? And so at that time, not a lot of people knew about the Billy Meier contacts. So I obviously went and started touching base with some colleagues and looking into it, and very, very rapidly realized that, in my opinion, and still to this day, that this was the real thing, that it was a phenomenal contactee case. And I've always kind of liked contactee cases over the years. And 40 years ago, a lot of UFO researchers would not touch a contactee case. It was all abductions. It was all grays. We had no idea what was really going on. But I've always been gravitated towards certain contactee cases throughout the years. And so I just dove into this one. I just loved the Billy Meier case, started learning as much as I could about it. Eventually, Dr. Wendell Stevens and I were at a couple of conferences together speaking, and him and I became friends and shared information on it. And it's just one of my overall favorite cases. And I've been a photographer for years, amateur photography, professional photography to some extent. And the photographic evidence is, even though we've talked about we're moving away from nuts and bolts these days. Back in the day, pictures and video of UFOs were just the holy grail, man. They were the evidence that we love to see. And even though they don't really tell you a lot about what's going on, I still love the pictures and the videos. But again, you have to remember how little evidence even a really good photograph tells you about the UFO phenomenon. So, but back then it took a while for a lot of researchers to get used to how good these pictures were, and that they were real, and they were taking pictures of real objects, and so over time, the understanding of this information has evolved. And I'm sure today our presenter has been a scientific researcher for over 40 years. In 1986, he found previously unknown warnings about mankind's climate change and global warming, also foretelling increasing frequencies and intensity of all forms of storms, blizzards, tsunamis, etc. The warnings, which were in the information he found in 1979, were originally published beginning in 1951 by the Swiss farmer named Billy Meier. Meier also first warned about the damage to the ozone layer from atomic bomb explosions and about the connection between the extraction of petroleum and earthquakes and volcanic eruptions, all of which were subsequently scientifically collaborated. While the Billy Meier UFO contacts are the only significantly proven contacts between extraterrestrials and a human being on Earth, they also literally hold the key to our future survival. In this presentation, he will review the still irreproducible pre-digital era UFO evidence from Billy Meier and the independent expert analysis and authentication that make the contacts ironclad and significantly authentic. Then he will present numerous explanations of the specific, prophetically accurate scientific, environmental, and geological information provided to and published by Billy Meier, often years or even decades before the events and discoveries occurred. Most important, he will answer the always unanswered question in ufology: if the contacts are real, what's the reason for them? While the contacts weren't intended for us to just chase lights in the sky, we'll learn that the reason has always been to help us assure our own, now obviously very threatened, future survival. This is one of these little quizzes I like to do with people. I like to ask people, if a UFO landed and the aliens got out and walked over to you, what's the first thing that you would ask them? And lots of people will say, where are you from? Bad question. Think about it. How can you prove where they're from if you can't get there from here, right? They could tell you anything, wouldn't matter, right? The question right here that our next presenter is going to be talking about is, why are you here? What's the reason for you being on this planet and contacting me at this time? So please join me in welcoming Michael Horn.
Thank you, Forrest. Pardon me. Thank you very much for that presentation, introduction, I should say. And hopefully I'm going to have a presentation that you're going to want to all know more about. So I'm going to, in a moment here, bring on this video, this window, which I hope you all can see, and I think you can. And I call the Billy Meier UFO contacts the key to our future survival. As Forrest said in the introduction, let's find out why. So here's the question. Is Billy Meier the only authentic UFO contactee? These days, we hear a lot, obviously, and at the conference, you hear a lot about contactees, abductees, all sorts of claims about things. So we're going to take a look at things like this. And I'd like to pause on this for a moment. I'd like you to look at this. I'd like you to look at this object. This is one photograph out of a series of 9 out of 1,200 that Billy Meier has taken over the many, many years. I'd like you to notice that this object has a tree and a sky reflecting in it. There's a shadow. Now, a lot of people thought that Billy must be taking photographs with models and miniatures. We'll see that that is clearly not the case. But the reason I want you to look at this, I want you to see, the sky and the water down there and the trees. And I'd like you to take a moment to reflect on who has shown you any photographs comparable to this in your entire life, in your studies, your research at the conference, or what have you. And then let's move on. So I'm going to either read or paraphrase just for the sake of people knowing what these slides are if they can't see them clearly. The confirmed existence of extraterrestrial life would be the single greatest discovery in all of science and human history, superseded only by the confirmed contact between extraterrestrials and the people of Earth. So we now look at what is the criteria used to determine the truth, not claims, not anecdotes and stories. What's the criteria? And that criteria is the quantity and especially the quality of the evidence. The foundational evidence in the Meier case, unbeknownst to probably the majority of people in ufology and maybe even a great number of people who study the Meier case, is the evidence actually goes back to 1964. This is simply a drawing of an alleged extraterrestrial woman named Asket. She's said to be Billy Meier's second contact person. And we have these photographs that Billy Meier took in 1964. Her ship is the one that we see floating above this ashram in India, where Billy Meier had gone to study Buddhism as he was studying all of the religions of the world and many, many other things in his travels in the 1950s, especially, and into 60s. So this is, kind of blurry enhancement close up. These are what we're usually familiar with, lights in the sky, but in this case, these are 8 of the ships or so, pardon me, of Asket's command. And if you'll look down at the lower right-hand corner here, there is a woman there who was the nanny, if you will, to a young girl who was an eyewitness to these events. Now, I'm not going through every single eyewitness and everything else because we have to get to some other very important information. Now, what you're looking at here is a photograph in an album. This photograph of the photograph we took in 2006 when we were making the film called The Silent Revolution of Truth. Now, what you see here, as best you can, is Billy Meier sitting on the ground. That is a spire from a building in the distance. He's wearing his cowboy hat that he was wearing quite frequently during the 60s when he was roaming around. And this cross in the sky, now, as you can tell from this overall photograph, we were, virtually nose to the album here. That is part of the photograph. It's not painted on. It wasn't white tape. You can see somewhat go back to that. The obscuring factor here of the clouds around it. This is a hologram generated by Asket, projected in the sky while Billy Meier sat on the ground in 1964 in India. And at some point, we will talk about why. He took those photos with a 1940s Kodak bellows type camera, as did the woman who took the photo of him there. My father had one of these very difficult old camera. You had to slide the thing out. No special effects, photo manipulation. And of course, it's all quite prior to Photoshop and any computer effects. So we had a real expert who analyzed this. It's a story in itself. We'll see if we get to have time to tell the story of who this man is that looked at all this. But this is an article that appeared in 1964 in the paper that's called The Statesman. It's a newspaper that had been in existence about 100 years at the time that Billy was interviewed by a rather credible reporter, an award-winning reporter for this paper. And it describes in here that he interviews this 27-year-old Swiss vagabond who has, like a knapsack camera and an album with 80 UFO photos. 80. We only have about a dozen that survived those times. You've seen some of them. So 80 photos. They're seen and described by the reporter. 11 or 12 are still available, including the cross in the sky, and there are credible, still living eyewitnesses. Okay, let's go back to that for a second. There it is. Now, Joe Tisk, this is the guy. He was a top investigator for the USAF OSI and the Department of Defense. They are tasked, by the way, with protecting the country. They don't investigate UFOs. He personally vetted hundreds and hundreds, and I saw all the citations. Guy's a real deal. He vetted all these people who were either already in prominent positions in politics, in government, what have you, or who were aspiring to high levels of power and prestige, who could end up with their fingers on the nuclear trigger. And he approached the Meier case as a hardcore skeptic. He called me out of nowhere. I didn't know who he was. It wasn't until months later that he told me his real qualifications. So he examines this evidence. He corroborates the story around Pobol Chang, the young girl who was at this ashram in India, that she had indeed been an ambassador at the UN. He said Meier's the most honest person he's ever seen when he watched all his videos. He demolished Kevin Randle and other skeptics. He had concluded that the Meier case is simply 100% ironclad authentic, and he would represent it voluntarily against any skeptical attacks. And this is a man with real credentials, hardcore guy. So he did. He wrote this whole article. He allowed me to publish it for him, and he explained how and why the layman can go through even the 1964 evidence, and from that alone be able to conclude that this is authentic, it's real, and you don't have to have his credentials to do it. So now we come to what's called the official era, if you will, where the photos that we're most familiar with from 1975 to 82. And we are going to pause a little bit as we go through these. I'd like you to notice that there are dissimilar metals that have been used in the construction of this object. And again, Billy Meier took these with a more modern 35 millimeter film camera, still no digital. Here it is again. You can see this metal looks more like a bronze or copper against these more silver looking metals, etc. Just, you know, if somebody's going to, out of nowhere in 1975, start making UFO models, that's a lot of work. So this is another one of the photos in that 9 photograph series. We'll see some more here. Reflections again in this craft. Feast your eyes. Now here, pardon me, this is a photograph was taken at the same time the film was made. And perhaps some of you have seen the film. We're not showing films today. I don't want to get that deep into it. Big branch thing in the foreground. Nice 3 discs here. When the film is rolling, you'll see that these discs are rotating, these 2, and then at a certain point they simply disappear, leaving this disc in the foreground. This photo was taken from inside one of the UFOs by Billy Meier above Switzerland. Now, anybody that has claimed over the years that they're a UFO contactee certainly must have evidence, at least of this quality, to corroborate their story. Shouldn't we expect that? Another photo from within. Billy Meier in 1975 is inside a craft with one of the human extraterrestrials. And he's taking photographs through their apertures or windows or whatever. Well, we do have a, I got rid of it, but I'm glad this is showing. You're going to see something interesting here. Watch the flanging. Oops, if I can go back to it, you'll watch the flanging here. And we're going to see some lights, 2 lights going off and on, one from the top part of the ship and one right coming up there. And you'll see it again up there, there. This is when Meier zoomed in. He had been on a photo op. He zoomed in on the craft. Let's do it one more time, I think. This is not a video. It's not a digitally enhanced anything. There it is. And again, we see the lights flash. Do we think this man, one-armed man, made a model? The best skeptic who's ever made models of Meier's ships couldn't duplicate that. He couldn't really duplicate any others. He made beautiful photographs of beautiful models, but that was it. So this is the very controversial wedding cake craft. At a distance, hovering in front of a real tree, not a little baby miniature tree. A little closer. Another photo of it, taken by Meier about, maybe 40, 60 feet in the air. I believe he was sitting on another craft at this point. There it is. Just give you the whole thing here, these little light-like jewel-like things. There were about 100 of those around there. And then he also, there you go, you can see this. Do you think this one-armed man in Switzerland made this? I don't. The blue thing you can see somewhat in the center up here is a lens. They figured some form in there. Nighttime photo of the craft. And lo and behold, lots of detail. Lots of detail. And now when you enhance it in Photoshop, when you take the 35 millimeter photograph right off the website, drop it in Photoshop, boost the contrast, reduce the brightness, or vice versa, you get that this is a large object over a road down here. This is one of those fence posts. It's like a 1 meter marker thing they have, or about a meter tall, these posts in Switzerland. You've got a hillside in the background. This is nighttime. You can do it yourself. We showed this in Times Square. There were state-of-the-art analyses that were done on the various evidence. And astronaut Gordon Cooper, most people don't know, he said Meier is meeting with extraterrestrials. The photos are very fine, absolutely authentic. And he didn't know why the whole world is trying their best to make them out to be fake. Then we have something that, well, 1981, never before seen photographs. I discovered them in Moab, Utah, in the remaining archives of Lieutenant Colonel Wendell Stevens. And this that you're seeing here, this is Asket's ship. Billy is inside. That, my friends, is a then top secret U.S. stealth fighter. Here you go. There it is, nice, clear. That's as close as they got. And the story on that, I'll tell you really quickly, is Wendell Stevens, the lead investigator, actually was in contact with Billy Meier in 1969. Meier and Asket picked him up, brought him forward to 1981 when they knew that the stealth would be tested. He took 5 photos. They took him back to his own time, and he just simply hid the photos away. And lo and behold, in the last of 24 boxes that I went through in Moab, Utah, there were these photos. These have been offered via Twitter and Facebook, whatever. I've offered them to every so-called UFO expert and investigator, not a one of whom will even respond, my friends. Not a one of whom will even respond to the best photographic evidence that we have seen, certainly in decades, since Meier's originals came out. Look at that. That's a stealth fighter. That's a real UFO. These are the quacky people who refuse to test the evidence, among many. John Greenwald is busy downloading what I consider to be digital toilet paper and chasing lights in the sky. Kevin Randall is busy with lights in the sky in Roswell. I offer, and they simply turn up their noses. This is how the Black Vault locks out the UFO truth. So John is all just enthralled with the fact that the CIA is giving him a bunch of digital toilet paper. Here's the handprints, Billy Meier. His hand on the right, the smaller hand, if you want to, if I can do this without moving the slide, thumb, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's 7 fingers, not from the play Aaron, but from another race, kind of friendly little guys that have an acidic skin composition, chemical composition. Here, papillary lines. Here you've got, they put from the kind of elbow down to the hands and smeared around. This is only one of the cars they did it on. Linda Moulton Howe asked if she could bring some scientists to examine this. Billy says, of course, just don't destroy the car. Linda Moulton Howe never called back. Here they are. This is someone else's hand because Billy doesn't have a left hand. There you are. Etched into the finish of the car over 4 years at least, through all the seasons and weathers, not painted, not faked, not hoaxed. There are no other authentic UFO cases, no other authentic contactees, no Greys, reptilians, and Dracos running around, and no alien abductions. There's secret military to keep everybody chasing their tails and being afraid of so-called aliens. These are the people that I personally consider to be truth suppressors. And if you'll indulge me, and I don't mind being challenged in the question and answer period, I have approached and offered and sent information to all of these people and parties over the years. I have offered to debate anybody on this list and others. This is just a small list. Nobody wants to do that. And nobody here has any evidence. That's right. Prove me wrong. Now we've run into this, the SETI scam. For those of you that know anything about SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, this is Seth Shostak. He is an astronomer at SETI who seems to have the job of trying to belittle and dismiss people with evidence, which SETI claims to be looking for. So Seth Shostak recently asked what happened to me, because I'd been sending SETI information and evidence since at least 2011, actually before. Whatever happened to me? I was flogging the Billy Meier story. Well, I answered Seth Shostak in great detail, and he's kind of didn't respond. But here we go. As far back here in 2015, Times Square, I took out a press release about sending the evidence to SETI. The press release company gave me 15 seconds of displaying one of Meier's craft there. We have provided SETI with the evidence for years and years. This is where I did a recent thing. I used that same thing so you can read it better. SETI sent evidence of UFO contact by Billy Meier. This is the quackery of SETI. They have suppressed and attacked the singularly authentic case for years. For 37 years, they failed to detect or contact or be contacted by anything. Well, 5 years earlier, I already found the truth about UFO contacts. They hadn't even been formed then in 1979. They have no expectation of finding real evidence. You'll see in a moment who told me that they don't even have the equipment, the personnel, or the protocols to test it. And yet they demand that contacts happen the way they expect, radio signals and all this other nonsense. They are set up in large part to keep people away from the Billy Meier contacts, because the UFO cover-up, essentially, that is what it is effectively about. You don't hear about it. You see everything else but. Well, this is Bill Diamond, the director of SETI. I sent an invitation to him online, an open letter to Bill Diamond. He came, he responded. I said to him, what about this evidence? And the two books by Wendell Stevens, over 500 pages each, and all of these experts from, well, he didn't respond. He simply said to me, we're on the same team. We have the same objectives. That's right. He considers us to be on the same team as SETI with the same objectives. And then after he was challenged, he took his marbles and went home. Resignation. Yeah, I'm out of here. Sorry, I thought we were going to be playing softball here. I said, no, this is hardball. So this is what Shostak said after Bill Diamond told me he didn't have anything. They couldn't do it. They couldn't look at anything. We have the technological capability to find life on other worlds, and that ability is improving. So Seth Shostak kind of makes poor old Bill Diamond into a non-truth teller, to put it politely. See, we have a petition up now. And believe me, you're welcome to sign it, because it will help any and everybody who's sincere about ufology. Why? Because these are real scientific experts, and each one of these people analyzed evidence in the Meier case. None of the aforementioned people that I pointed to, none of whom will sue me for saying that they're phonies, none of them have any of this kind of, there's nothing to examine. There's only anecdotal claims and so-called evidence, third-party stuff. But these are people that stepped up. They examined, they analyzed. Marcel Vogel analyzed the metal samples. Michael Malin, creator of the cameras for the Mars Observer mission, he analyzed Meier's photographs. They're good photographs. I don't see any evidence of a hoax. I don't know about a guy in Switzerland meeting with extraterrestrials, but the photos are good. H. David Froning, astronautical engineer and aerospace expert, came to one of my presentations, and I invited him up to share the stage so he could tell the corporate audience of 450 people that he, as a scientist working in the defense industry as well, along with other scientists, believed they'd made breakthroughs in zero-point energy and hyperspace travel. A real scientist. Nils Rognerud, he analyzed audio recordings. He was one of, along with Stephen Ambrose, who's to his right, these guys were among the people who analyzed 4 separate sound recordings. So, oops, sorry. There's Nils Rognerud down there. Gordon Cooper, the astronaut, above him. Sorry, I got them a little confused. I think Eric Eliason, I think he's with the USGS. These people are professionals, they're real. And they went on the record years ago when they got to analyze the evidence. It gets worse. Who else hates the truth and is only in it for the money? Well, hold on. Put your hands over your eyes and ears if you want to. My friend and yours, George Norrie. Why would I say such a thing? We'll get to it. Here it is. I've been on that show, interviewed since about 2001, Art Bell or so started. I've been interviewed by George about 10 times at least. He interviewed me and recorded me on the video there at Beyond Belief and Gaia. He's known about Meier's evidence and prophecies for years, and yet he always asks me to provide interview questions. Why didn't this guy step up to support the truth? You're going to find out in a couple minutes here why I'm steamed about all this. This isn't just about UFOs, my friends. You're going to understand what's happened here to all of us in this world. You see this Pentagon stuff? We got this in January. Why did they release these grainy video game, 1970s video game quality pictures and videos to us? Is it to cover up the Meier case? The latest UFO disclosure, this preceded it by a few days, started to talk about all this for about a fake ET attack scam. It's that and it's more. Lovable Lou Elizondo, former intelligence officer. Remember him? He got together with Tom DeLonge and they created this to the Stars Academy with Chris Mellon. Chris Mellon, another former intelligence officer, put that in quotes, major banker, defense industry. Here's Lou, Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. What's the threat? I claim that Lou is missing. He must have been abducted by aliens. Oh, the real threat, my friends, is the disinformation campaign led by the Pentagon, the CIA, phony ufologists, and all that leads to a possible fake ET attack, or, and this one you should watch out for, a dead-end war with Russia and China. Just the other day, U.S. military paid scientists to build physics-bending weapons for wars with UFOs or China. So here is the end game. Forget this nonsense about an intelligence and report, a defense report's going to be given at the end of June. This is a setup to lead us either into fake ET attack or all these orbs that appeared around our Navy warships in 2019. It's either from outer space or the Chinese. So we've got to make what? More weapons for war. That's what it's about. That's why Lou Elizondo is courting Tom DeLonge, who doesn't know his guitar from a UFO. That's why he's courting the people in the so-called debrief. We're fortunate to have people like the debrief helping to get this information out. This is what's called a PSYOP, a real disinformation campaign. And they're playing the UFO community because people have been so darn gullible for so long, they're just ready to believe anything. Here it is, the always unasked question in ufology. If the contacts are real, what's the reason for them? Well, they are, as Forrest said, the key to our future survival, literally. Here's the harsh truth about the COVID pandemic. What's got COVID got to do with any of this? and those who kept it from you. We began February 25th, 2020, to publish what is still the most accurate information about COVID you will find anywhere. This is what we published on the 25th. I now have over 100 articles on my blog with information from Meier and the Plejaren. The Plejaren gave us this information. It's already a pandemic. Avoid airplanes, ships, mass transportation, and crowds. Stay home. Can you see beyond social, distancing, social isolation? They're telling us all this, and this information. Billy Meier didn't himself write all this, folks. The real numbers of infections and deaths are higher. The real incubation period, up to 4 weeks or 3 months. I've had doctors confirm that to me. We are the first to publish. This is spread by asymptomatic people, that it's airborne, on the breath, clothing, aerosols, breathing masks, the regular ones for surgical use, useless. You have to use an N95, KN95, or even full body protective suits and breathing apparatus and hermetically sealed quarantines. If that had been done, we would not have this to this day. The Asian races, as we learned, were initially most susceptible. It spread to everybody else. It becomes more aggressive over time. They explain mutations long before our virologists and our WHO and the CDC, who've mishandled this to everybody's disadvantage and illness and death. Children, mainly immune, main hidden spreaders of these, that was discovered, but they also explained their own children are only immune for a while. This is going to go into infants in the womb. We had that published months before it happened. China and the US suppressed the truth for political and economic reasons. The WHO, they're culpable for not proclaiming it a risk, for not shutting down travel and all of that. Look, I put call it a new online COVID test, September 2020. And what you're looking at here, you see up here in the red, November 30th, that's when they actually published the first thing in German for Meier. This is a pandemic. How it originated. This is not a nefarious, plan by Bill Gates. Sorry, that kind of stuff may come later. This was an American went to China in the 70s, a guy who was really mad at our country. He met with a man named Mao Zedong, the ruler of China, and they started to contemplate how to do this. It then got developed in secret labs that don't have anything to do with the current Chinese government. Now, that might be hard for people to understand, but we just have tons of this information about it. Tons and tons. So what this is a test. When you click on, you look up here, okay, pandemic, we cover self-isolate and lockdown. You click here, February 25th, you see what they wrote about it. Billy Meier, we published it. Wikipedia, that's the first we can find about a self-isolate and lockdown. A month later, a half a month later, whatever you're going to call it. Then here you go to Airborne. We published on the 25th, March 17th, July 8th. We have 23 or 24 of these listed. This is from real extraterrestrials, not the imaginary Dracos, great white sharks. I don't care what you want to call them, the grays and dromedans. Real extraterrestrial human beings who care more about us, our world, and our survival than a lot of folks here do. So what you need to know, this is a bioweapon developed in a Wuhan, China lab, accidentally released. Sorry, we can't blame the Chinese government for this one. The opportunity to contain was missed when these warnings were ignored. And Meier and the Plejaren said, lock down your world 3 to 5 months. You can contain, control, and conquer this. Everybody was impatient. We think it's a terrible thing. Oh, I have to wear a mask. I'm a patriot. Oh, so you don't care if you might be spreading or getting it from your fellow citizens? Well, I've got my Second Amendment rights. Great. But that's not being taken away from you by Billy Meier and the Plejaren. If you catch this disease, your gun ain't going to protect you from it. Our missiles can't do anything about it. And now the Plejaren have said, because we missed it, the potential casualties will rise to 500. That's 500 million people worldwide. And they always publish the information before the CDC and the WHO. Remember, we started out here with a picture of a UFO. The info here is never theoretical. It never needs revisions or corrections, and it hasn't for the 70-something years that they've been providing scientific information. Oh, gosh, I have so much of it I could go through if we had the time. The population are effectively guinea pigs for inadequately tested vaccines. You don't develop a vaccine against a bioweapon in 3 months if you can develop it at all. This is highly dangerous. The vaccines alone are going to cost many lives because this is all about profits. The play on explained that there were leaders in various governments who were profiting because they made deals with the vaccine companies. After that came out, 3 people in the German government retired because they were outed by it. Who hid it from you? Well, the federal, state, local government officials have. Have you heard about this material? When we published on February 25th, there were, hold on to your seats, 57 cases in the entire country. National and local media, well, let me tell you about that. March 5th, I sent this information around. I began on March 5th. There were 5 cases in all of Arizona. Every one of the media that I sent it to, and the government and medical officials, and that included from the governor to the hospitals to the newspapers and the TV stations, they have suppressed. I don't mean claimed it's a hoax. They haven't they won't talk about it. They will not allow it to be published. They will not allow it to be published in this state, which is now pushing something like, 890,000 cases and over 17,000 deaths. 5 cases when I, on the record, started sending emails until even last July. Profit-driven, the WHO, the CDC, the medical experts and doctors. Yeah, a lot of people said, well, everything's now they're claiming it's all a COVID death because the hospitals are making. A lot of that happens, folks. It doesn't mean that these people, that there aren't huge numbers of people dying from this dreaded disease. And before the WHO went over, I think it was in March, they sent a new team over to China. We already published then what Billy Meier said. They're going to go over, it'll be another cover up. You'll see, they'll say this, this is exactly what happened. Did any of the UFO experts tell you folks about this? I don't think so. These are the truth suppressors, my friends. Many people who started off with a very sincere intention and got caught up trying to be famous and successful in selling books. Stephen Greer with his Silly Disclosure Project and Aliens on Demand and $700,000 to $1,000 trainings to shine your flashlight in the sky. I'm steamed about this. We've been fighting to get this truth out for a long time. And every one of the people here received this information. He've either attacked and or suppressed it. And that includes my friend George Norrie. Sorry, but the truth, my friends, is a little rough at times. Again, I was on Coast to Coast. I don't know if I told you this, on February 21st. Had a nice show. And I mentioned to George at that time, to the audience, that I was on CBS TV Morning News in San Diego on January 23rd of last year. I was asked about controversial information in this case. I then mentioned that Billy Meier had spoken about the coronavirus that came out as SARS in 2003. He published information warning about it in 1989 and 1995. I didn't even know when I did that show in January that this thing was coming and was going to be so virulent. So on the 23rd of February, 2 days after I'm on Coast to Coast, I get that document that I showed you, that first one out of dozens. I publish it on February 25th, 57 cases in the country. February 27th, I call up. I talk to Lisa Lyon at Coast to Coast. Can I have 5-10 minutes to warn the audience about what's coming from this disease? There's only 57 people in the country now, but this is going to be bad. No, you were on. Well, you're not a doctor. Well, why should we give you more time? I said, I've been interviewed on Coast to Coast 20 times. You know, Billy Meier. No, we can't do that. That's not important. It's truth, my friends. It's harsh. It's harsh. We're not sugarcoating anything. Billy Meier has survived 23 attempts on his life, kidnapping attempts on his children's lives. I've had to move because I've been threatened with death too. Nobody yet shot at me. I hope they don't. What's coming as the time fulfills happens to have been the title of a film I put out, 2012 or 13. Billy Meier, by the way, in that film tells us all about stuff that's recently happened with Russia moving the troops to the Arctic and all sorts of things. But what's coming? Earth changes and environmental destruction. As far back as 1948, Billy Meier was shown certain things, including the COVID pandemic, when his first teacher, Svath, took him forward in time. But he also was shown and published information that in Italy, for instance, between 2015 and 2017, there would be a series of very strong earthquakes that would lead to the coming eruptions of 5 prominent volcanoes in Italy. Those earthquakes took place. 3, at least, of those volcanoes have now become active. Off the top of my head, we've got Mount Marsili, we've got Mount Etna, Mount Vesuvius, we've got Campi Flegrei, and Mount Stromboli. Just about all of them have become active. New diseases and resurgence of old ones. This disease, by the way, this COVID-19 is what's referred to throughout the Meier material as a rampantly spreading disease. It means it's something that takes on a massive impact on society. It was predicted in this material as far back as thousands of years ago by the prophet of Jeremiah, who is one of the overall 7 prophet contactees with the Pleiaren. That's how far back this mission goes, if you will. The old diseases are going to reappear. Some have already in some places. Some places polio has already come back, or plagues and what have you. Wars, terrorism, civil wars, well, shouldn't be a surprise, except, well, you know, in 1981 and again in 1987, Billy Meier published that the United States of America will have 2 coming terrible civil wars, one following upon the other. I read the first 81 prediction in 86 and I laughed at it. People laughed at it every time I started to publish it after 87, reading the 87 one. I've had it on my website and blog since at least 2002, published well over a dozen articles on it. Are we laughing now? In 2017, Billy Meier said that American leadership, people in American leadership positions will be threatened and endangered by hostile anti-governmental forces and others. That started in actuality on January 6th. We've had the whole last year all sorts of left against right and polarization stuff going on. That's what we're looking at. There will be a global financial collapse. In 2006, I was in Switzerland and I asked Billy, is the Iraq war fundamentally about oil? He said, no. Fundamentally, finger in the air, it's about your dollar. If things go a certain way, you may as well roll cigarettes with your paper money. I put that up on a YouTube video. It's up as of 2007. Take a look at what's coming. Take a look at what's happening. All this thing with the finances, this is floating on a very insubstantial support system. It's going down. On top of that, in 2017, Meier said specifically, when this global financial thing, the collapse is underway, the American people are going to be dispossessed. Everything will be taken from them. And then the government will turn the police and military against the partly heavily armed U.S. population. So this is a non-political statement, my friends. We are not on the side of seeing things be, falling into destruction, polarization leading to civil wars and all. But even in 1975 and again in 2012, Clarence said to Billy, if the American people don't change things for the better after 2020, the USA superpower will cease to exist, meaning we will be superseded by A couple other powers like Russia and China. So the time for chasing lights in the sky, my friends, is long over. None of the supposed and so-called UFO contactees and experts have even one piece of evidence to support their phony claims or their lust for profit and fame. In any actually reputable field of study, they'd be laughed at, thrown out, and ignored. But unfortunately, ufology is unscientific. There are virtually no scientific standards. It's the deliberate suppression through ufology of the singularly authentic Billy Meier UFO context for decades. They share the blame for the spread of this disease and the inescapable consequences. Now, and I'm not a fearmonger. I, among others, have been out there speaking about this, presenting the harsh and real truth so that it would be grasped, so that people will begin to turn towards the truth. Go on to any of these UFO forums. If you can find 10 of them, you try and post on Billy Meier, your ufology tries to destroy it. And that's also because a lot of these forums are fronts for the intelligence agencies. And that's a whole other story, something I accidentally outed some years ago with something called Above Top Secret. Yes, the Billy Meier UFO contacts are the key to our future survival. And this is something, I put this out in 2014. See some of the things we listed about Fukushima, climate change, wars, 9/11, terrorism, oil spills, environmental disasters, civil unrest. He warned the people right in here. I talk about the coming American civil wars again. And the antidote is what's called the teaching of the creation energy and the spiritual teaching. It's a non-religious, belief-free teaching. How do things really work in life if people want love, peace, freedom, harmony, and to live as real human beings, not climbing and clambering all over each other to try and get the last piece of paper or silver? How do we do it? Well, we do it through 100% self-responsibility. We have to learn to see things as they really are, not as we want them to be, or fear that they are, or we're being told they are by some airhead politician. Neutral, positive thinking. They teach us how to see things as they are, how to then know how to think along the lines of what leads to positive outcome, how to stop a certain line of thinking, how to create another one, how to promote the kind of thinking that you may have that's working, how you can know how to get these effects in your own personal life, which then leads to the collective. The Might of the Thoughts is a book, phenomenal book by Billy Meier that teaches us how to think, the might of the thoughts, because we all do this 24/7, but we're doing it unconsciously. So the might of our thoughts is dissipated. It's all over the darn place. What do we do? Ufology. Yeah, so I take a dim view of it. Let's put it that way. And instead of leaving it hanging in that heaviness, which happens to be harsh and real, if we don't know we're living in this time of the pandemic long warned of, we learn how to think clearly. If we want to know what the play are and are actually saying in depth about this disease and the vaccines and everything else, it's for free on my blog, 100 articles, theyflyblog.com. So, well, I guess that's steamed things up a bit. I am glad to take questions. I'm glad to take challenges. I'm not offended by anything. If you have great objection to anything said, please be prepared to refer me to evidence that contradicts it. If you think I've gored someone's cow, whether it's a UFO expert or George Norrie or somebody, you give me the counterbalancing evidence and I promise you, look at it. So that concludes this portion of my program for today.
Well, Michael, that was an interesting presentation. Yeah, I don't know what to say. I'm sorry, but I wish there would have been more content and less criticism. But I'm speaking as the MC of this conference. So I understand the emotions around this particular case, and I have always been very, very interested in what Meier says and what is going on. And I know a lot of people on your list do too. So I don't know. I definitely do not think we should get into trying to defend any of that. I think we should focus on the content and on the real information about the UFO phenomenon, and then that's going to lead us to a better understanding rather than fighting amongst ourselves anyway.
I am here if anybody else is.
Hi, Michael. I'm here. We're wait to take any questions. People might come on to ask you questions or possibly questions in the chat, and when they have questions in the chat, then I will read those out to you.
Okay. I will. Can I make a quick comment before that happens?
Oh, yes, sure.
Okay. I just want to say about the idea about not fighting amongst ourselves. In every reputable science, in every credible and reputable field of study, disagreement is welcomed if it helps people lead to the truth, to the facts. And while people don't maybe like to hear some of this stuff, we are in real life. And remember, we did say we're going to find out what the reason for the Meier contacts are. So I understand, and believe me, I understand how people can feel about something like this. I've spent 42 years. I've met the man. I've been to Switzerland 20 times. I've interviewed him every time. I've made 5 documentaries on this. And I would be derelict in my own personal duty if I did not speak what I now know to be, as far as I can determine it, the truth. So I welcome any questions from anybody if you would like to, if we have any.
Okay, it looks like there's a Susan who asked, what was your blog again?
Sure, we've put that up. It's They Fly blog.
Oh, okay,
yes.
There I see it. Okay, and looks... I'm just saying, I'm waiting. We've got some coming in.
Sure. Sure.
Okay, we have one from Paul. He's asking, can you give me some information about the tomb? I will not pronounce this right.
Emmanuel.
Okay. I'll let you answer that question then.
Surely, I would be glad to.
Thank you.
Today's presentation didn't allow time for all of that's in this case. So let me tell you something about this term, this man's name, Emmanuel. Billy Meier is said to be, in this material, the 7th and final prophet, contactee, for Earth, for our people. There were 6 preceding: Enoch, Elijah, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Emmanuel, and Muhammad, believe it or not. Emmanuel being the real name of the man called Jesus Christ, for whom there is no historical record. There's religious books. The man existed. He is mentioned in the Old Testament in Isaiah 7:14, and his name shall be called Emmanuel. And in the New Testament, if you look up and you go to Matthew, I believe it's 1:23, at least once in the New Testament, and his name shall be called Emmanuel. He is the man who was indeed crucified, who survived the crucifixion, who, along with disciples and family, went on after the 3-day period in the tomb when he came out because he had been healed. It's an amazing story. And that book, that document, was co-discovered by Billy Meier and a Greek Orthodox priest back, I believe it was in about 1965, 64, somewhere right around there, in the tomb in Jerusalem. So there's nothing to believe anywhere in this case. You can investigate this information, because what's said here is that the man upon whom the entire New Testament and Christianity actually is based, the story got changed and manipulated. He was a real man. He died at the age of 111 in Srinagar, India, and his tomb is there. And his mother, Mary, died when he was about 38. They had been traveling through different countries from from the Middle East, from Jerusalem, then Pakistan. They had gone into also Afghanistan, different places. So this is radical information for everybody to hear. It'll certainly sound heretical, but I think if you go to the website, theyfly.com, you'll see the Talmud Emmanuel. If you go to They Fly blog, you'll see information there for it. You can make up your mind yourself if you think it's real or true or not. Oh, someone I think has posted a link. Thank you very much. It's nice. Yes. Any other questions on that, Brandy? Thank you.
Hi. Let me adjust my camera a little bit. Hi, Michael. I know that not just contactees like Billy Meier, but also abductees have shared that they have seen in their abductions, they've seen some of the earth changes. What do you have to say about that?
Well, for a long time, going back a few decades, actually, of course, the talk about earth changes has been in the news, or it's been in the New Age UFO paranormal community, because a lot of that, listen, Billy Meier is the first person to specifically warn about unnatural, man-made climate change, global warming, damage to the ozone, the damage being connected largely to atomic bomb explosions and things like that. Other people have certainly said, well, we have a climate crisis, but we have documents like this from Meier on all of the various degrees of damage coming from earth changes and the climate change and all. I don't personally think that a lot of people who believe that they've been quote unquote abducted have had experiences with extraterrestrials. And I happen to know military people who've also confirmed. I have one friend in particular. I did a video with him. He was an Army Ranger as well as worked in secret weapons development. He said they have means of going around at night and creating false abduction experiences for people in their homes. So people can believe whatever they want, but until people can prove something, it's anecdotal. Look, I've had 7 UFO sightings. I've been within 20 feet of a small monitoring craft from the Pleiadian. Why should you believe that? You shouldn't. You don't have to bother with it. It's anecdotal. Is it true? Yeah, I say it's true. But I don't base my research on that experience or the experience of over 100 other eyewitnesses to the craft and 5 other photographers. I base it on hard evidence and what we can do with that evidence, what we can learn from that for our benefit, for our future survival, as I say, so that we don't waste our time chasing lights in the sky. Thank you. Is there another question?
Hi, Michael.
Hi.
I'm more of one of those spiritual airy-fairy kind of chicks, so I'll just let you know that. But I do appreciate your passion. I appreciate that. And I know that a big part of your passion, has been disseminating out information to wake people up. That's my understanding from what I heard from you. But what do you think we can do collectively to resolve this issue for some of us who do believe we create with our thoughts, who want to make a contribution to humanity in as much of a positive way as possible?
Well, thanks for giving me chills on that one, really, because that's the kind of thing we should be talking about. We obviously create our reality through our thoughts. Now, let's be honest about 9 billion other people on the planet. Some of them are very powerful creators. The people that know how this works, at least part of it, who really know how to work that part are the people who control this world. They're not stopped by beliefs in anything. They don't have beliefs. They know what they want and they go at it. And sometimes it's extremely brutal. They are the people that ruin our world with their great power and hunger, ambition, and all that stuff. So when we, the people who care, the other half of who want to do the right thing, not just grab all the material stuff we can at any expense. When we learn how the might of the thoughts works, that's one of the books. There's a book called The Psyche by Billy Meier. The psyche is what we call the soul. The soul is not some eternal, immortal thing. The soul is a transitory construct pertaining to our emotions and our personality. It's the psyche. The spirit, the human spirit, is the immortal, eternal part of us inside. And then we have the consciousness, the overall consciousness of the human being, and using our consciousness to direct our thoughts properly. not just positive thinking. Everything's wonderful. I'm going to be rich. That doesn't really work. I used to say to my friends in the New Age, I did 12 years of New Age comedy, so I have two sides of this to me, right? And I would say to my friends, did you ever notice that rich people don't have affirmations on their refrigerator saying, I'm rich? They know it. They come from and they operate from that because they came to know that reality. So when we learn how to think, the might of the thoughts, we learn step by step how it works, how cause and effect is the underlying immutable law, one of many, of the creation of this universe. When we understand that every thought leads to a feeling, every feeling leads to another thought, and then an action or an inaction. And most of the time, we're doing it 95% of the time unconsciously. What if we were consciously observing and controlling our thinking and making sure that what we were thinking that had been otherwise unconscious, rumbling around our head all the time, was something we now carefully considered and we controlled. We decided, do I want to perpetuate that kind of thinking about this thing or this person, this situation? Or maybe there's something better, a better way of thinking about that. And then our inner wisdom starts bringing us that kind of, preferred reality, kind of preferred thinking. We then start to learn how to empower that and how thinking properly leads as a cause to an effect in our action that brings us what we truly want. There's one other thing. We have something called the Salome Peace Meditation that the Pleiadian extraterrestrials brought forward, and I believe it was around 1988, that everybody on Earth could do if they want. It takes 20 minutes. It's a little phrase in an ancient extraterrestrial language, easy to repeat. No fan. Salome Gamnan Ben Urda Ganiber Asala Hesperona. Something like peace to all beings on Earth and all creations of creation. It's just all about peace to everything, because our world is enshrouded literally with highly negative energy that's come from millennia of very misdirected thoughts, feelings, and behaviors of human beings. We have to fight against the ever-present and ever-pressing push to violence and domination and control and greed and fear. And it's all rooted, believe it or not, in overpopulation, which no one is saying should be genocided away. We have to learn to bring our populations under control. We have to understand our relationship to the nature, which is a major piece of creation, folks. It's bigger than we are. When we learn how it works and we think in accordance with it, then we balance everything. We have enough people and enough for everybody. And we don't go off worrying about, which will have future realities, that there are people now working on genociding people because there's too many. So I'm sorry for anybody that hears this and says, oh, this is so harsh. This is real life. And that's why ufology has to get in touch with real life. I'm not chasing lights in the sky. But to answer your question, we learn to think. We practice the peace meditation. We live in peace. We live in gratitude, harmony, freedom. I think we got it that way. Any other questions? Brandy. Brandy, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. We had somebody. Oh, there he is. Nathaniel, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Okay, there's your next question.
Uh-oh. I just want to know, are you familiar with Nancy Leiter of ZetaTalk.com? And can you confirm, if this is a legitimate website?
I didn't catch the website clearly. Maybe Brandy heard it better and could repeat it for me.
ZetaTalk.com. ZetaTalk.
Oh, yeah.
Zeta Talk. Yes.
Yeah. In my opinion, a load of nonsense and garbage. First of all, let's clarify something about so-called Zetas or Greys. There have been in our history, as we would know of Roswell most prominently, there have been about 8 or 9 crashes, retrievals. In some cases, so-called beings were found dead and or alive. Roswell was quite real and quite legitimate. Those were not extraterrestrials. Those were the android created by the people in Zeta Reticulum. They are like reconnaissance craft with, if the word robotic is more familiar to people, but these are androids. They are biological, mechanical, real creatures. They're not human beings. They're not the extraterrestrials. And when they died off completely, of course, way back then, there are no grays. Those were the grays that this whole disinformation about grays is modeled on, the Zeta Reticulum androids. So Zeta Talk is a load of garbage from a person who has no connection absolutely to anything extraterrestrial. And if that sounds like a terrible thing to say, let her, let them, whatever, present actual evidence instead of gobbledygook, and also taking information she might grab from Meier or whatever and start twisting to make her own, as all the so-called UFO channels do, and so many so-called contactees do. That's the reality of the game we're in now. So again, harsh, you don't have to buy anything I'm saying. Just think it through and search it out. Any other questions?
Oh, hey, Michael. One of the spiritual teachers I studied years ago is a group consciousness called Lazarus. And one of the things they were disseminating out years ago about the New Age, and don't make fun of Lazarus, please. But what they were talking about was a paradigm shift. I just listened more to his old stuff, but he was talking about one of the way where we're going to run into create was because we were going to run into solutionless problems, and the only way we were going to be able to resolve them was actually to create the solution first, and then it would lead us to a road to resolving the problem.
Okay, you want comments from me on that?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, sure. Look, I have a friend that spent a lot of money going to Lazarus channeling. I have to say, just so you know, honestly, where I come from, I began in 1986 to go to every available channeling session. I didn't go to Lazarus. I wasn't willing to pay money for that stuff. But I went to all sorts, Bashar and Sean Randall and Lisa Royale and all these people. And I'd like to say to people that I came away with enough valuable information to almost fill my teacup with room left over for an Olympic-sized swimming pool. In other words, I had friends that were really into it. So one day I said to one of my friends, "Greetings to all of you who walk upon the earth as masters in your realm. We greet you in love and light." And I did a whole channeling session from, all the jargon and everything else, because I was also writing New Age comedy songs about all this stuff. So here's the thing. A lot of people are very clever with coming up with nice sounding and fancy talk. They produce no actual evidence that they're in contact with anything, because there's nobody channeling through anyone. First of all, for instance, I believe you had Ramtha was another channel claimed to be channeling a 35,000-year-old warrior. According to the teaching, in this case, in the spiritual teaching, reincarnation is a fact of life, which would right away mean that a 35,000-year-old warrior isn't sitting around, floating around to channel through some woman who wants to raise Arabian horses. Okay, so we have to bring in common sense. Now, if we read something that makes sense, I don't care who it comes from. If it's good and it makes common sense or factual sense, we say, okay, that's testable. That's good. If somebody starts telling you they're getting it from other entities and all this stuff, and they give you fancy metaphysical, well, we create the solution first and then no, what we do is we learn to first think straight, which helps us to prepare ourselves to deal logically with things in life. And then we cease to create, it's going to take a long time, but we cease to create ongoing garbage in our individual and collective lives. We will still always make mistakes. That isn't the same thing. We have to make mistakes in order to learn, to correct, because if we didn't make mistakes, we would just be sitting there holding some level of perfection that never evolved. So we got to reach for the next thing, striving in life. There is no life without striving. There's no striving without life. So we are constantly striving in a spiritually focused, creationally, energetically focused striving. We seek to learn. We seek to test and apply. We don't take what anybody says is factual. I made an agreement with Billy Meier, a contract starting in 2004, 7-year contract. I'm in my third phase of that. I will represent you for free in the world. I don't pay you. You don't pay me. But I have to be free to say to people, if I don't know if something's true, I can say, I don't know if it's true. So according to the information in the case. And if I disagree with something, I can say, well, this is what's coming from Billy Meier, but I personally, I can't agree with it. I haven't been able to come to that same conclusion. And in both cases, I've had those experiences, and I'm grateful for them because I want to think for myself. So the people that sit up on stage for $400 a head and all the rest of it, you know, it sounds good. We're seeking for something better than dead end, pardon me, folks, religious polarization and beliefs that are just, you know, I mean, it's so precious. If you criticize politics or religion, people go out of their minds. It's like, well, why? I wrote an article years ago, The Fatal Flaws of Faith and Belief. And I said, look, every major religion that we know of rests on a premise. And you can't bring the premise into a courtroom. You can't bring it into kindergarten. What's the premise? That everything that's in this book is true because this book says it's true. It's true or not true. You have to figure that out. But that's not the reason that it's true, because it's in a book. So we've had taken from us literally that curious, intuitive impulse to think, to strive, to question, to challenge. So people get upset naturally. I understand. I'm going to call out all these. Look, since 1987, I've been presenting on this case. I've studied it since 79. And I've met a good number of those people, not all of them, but every one of them I've sent the Meier material to. They don't want to talk about, if it's true, why not? Well, I have a book about Rendlesham. Who is that one? You know, you get Richard Dolan, Nick. I'm saying these things because if I was in politics, if I was in science, I could say these things. I could say my opponent is absolutely incorrect, or this person over here is wrong. People don't melt and fall, you know, like snowflakes. They go, well, that's his opinion. I happen to think so and so's truth. Oh, good, fine. So we've got to get into real life here, and we do it through learning how to think, seeing things as they are, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So as to your core question, I'm sorry, but from friends of mine who spent the money and then realized that they had gone on a ride and it wasn't the spaceship, Lazarus and the Sean Ramtha and all the rest of them, Lisa Royale and Bashar, it's make-believe, folks. Some of the folks are very skillful, but show me evidence and I might change my mind. Brandy? This green screen is to catch tomatoes. Yeah.
All right. And we're all finished now.
Oh.
I want to thank you for coming on today, and you have the great rest of your day.
I thank you very much. And to everybody, if you go to the blog, you can find my email address. If you have something to say, send me an email and I'll be glad to respond. Thank you. And thank you. Thanks to Adnan and Forrest and everybody that made it possible for me to get on today as well.
Thank you.
My pleasure.